Hey guys, so in about 3 months, I'll be defending my PhD in physics, and I just wanted to tell you guys how I got here. So first, let's go all the way back to high school. I actually was never that interested in physics up until about, the time of high school, maybe 10th, 11th, 12th grade. That's where I really got interested in physics. When I was really young, my main interest was playing chess. I was a FIDE master at age 12 and was really good at chess, and I started playing competitively. And so my life was focused on really playing chess. I was doing good at school. I was really good in math, and I really liked the sciences. I knew that I was going to do something sciencey, but I wasn't sure exactly where I was going. I had a feeling I would do maybe something related to chemistry at some point because my family is more chem or bio oriented rather than physics oriented. But what happened is that at some point, my brother was watching a video by Veritasium, Derek Muller, and he just found it really interesting, so he wanted to show me and my other brothers. And so he called me over and he told me, watch this video, it's really cool. And I remember the video was on quantum computing, and I just started watching. The first time you watch something like this, your mind is like, what the heck is going on? I don't really understand it. But by the end of the video, you have this sense of mystery. Like you just maybe stepped into a world that is just waiting to be explored. And so that was my first step into the world of physics by just one video on quantum computing. And that got me scratching my head. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I never realized physics was as cool as this. I learned physics in school. I would take projectile motion and figure out how the ball moves. That was all fine, and I did well in it, but I never knew what was really out there. So after watching this video by Veritasium, it really took me down a rabbit hole. I started watching video after video after video. I would consume all the content on a channel. I would just go watch all the Veritasium videos, next channel. Vsauce, I'd watch all the Vsauce videos, next channel. Minute Physics, watch all the Minute Physics videos, next channel. Physics Girl, I'd watch all the Physics Girl videos, and so on and so on. I would even watch all the Eugene Kotoriansky videos, which are not like the most popular, but they're really good. They're really well made. And I would just binge watch physics to the point where I just started getting good in high school in physics, and I would just go home and I'd watch a bunch of physics videos and I'd learn about physics. So that was sort of the first stage of really getting into physics, getting into this thing that I just didn't really have it in my mind that I would do something like this in the future. But there was something else that was always at the back of my mind, and that is that I really was interested at some point in really deep questions and really fundamental questions like, why is the universe here? They're mostly philosophical questions. How does time work? Do you have free will? A lot of these questions, you're a teenager, they come to your mind. And at some point I realized that really physics is the most related to these kinds of questions. If you learn chemistry or biology, you might get an understanding, especially if you learn about, for example, neuroscience. Yes, it's related to free will. But if you really want to dig deep, then physics is where it's at. So that was another reason that I gravitated towards physics, is that I found that physics is most related to these philosophical questions. So now I had, this interest that was built up from YouTube videos, and then I had my own questions that I was interested in. And if you put those two together, it's really obvious what I was going to do. I wanted to major in physics. And doing that, I had to figure out what I wanted to do later. So the next step is figuring out what I want to do. All right, so I decided that I wanted to do physics. But what does that mean? So I started looking into it, what does it mean to do physics? And eventually all paths lead to Rome. You become a physicist, you get your PhD in physics, and you become a professor. So that was the natural progression. You have to go to undergrad, you have to do your degree in physics, then you apply to graduate school, you do your PhD in physics, and then once you get your PhD, I didn't really knew what a postdoc was. I would read postdocs. I didn't really know what that was back in the day, but you do postdocs. That's what they told me. And then after that, you go and you become a professor. You apply to be a professor. And throughout this sort of journey of trying to understand the whole process from A to Z, really Reddit was there to guide me, as well as my older brothers who had gone through college. So they can tell me a little bit about how to navigate through college, but mostly the idea of how to become a physics professor, that was all mostly Reddit, I would say. Okay, so I wanted to be a physicist. The next thing you should do is major in physics. By the way, I studied school in Lebanon. So in high school in Lebanon, it's a bit more advanced than it would be in the US. just if you take just the baseline of everyone's knowledge. If you start comparing, AP students versus just the baseline in Lebanon, then maybe there's apples to apples comparison there. But nevertheless, in Lebanon, it's a higher baseline than there is in the U.S. So I already came to the U.S. with a bunch of physics knowledge. Physics 1 and physics 2, I already had those in high school. So when I came here to the U.S., I majored in physics, and I didn't know that I could opt out of certain classes or transfer credits, and really they wouldn't have accepted it anyway, having studied high school in Lebanon. But nevertheless, I had to take physics 1 and physics 2 again. So my first year through undergrad, I had to retake some of the things that I already knew, but I was learning new math, because in math, even though I knew Calc 1, I wasn't that familiar with integration and Calc 2. So I would learn Calc 2 as well, and then a bunch of gen ed courses. So I'm a freshman in undergrad. I'm really excited. I'm in the physics department. I'm getting good grades. And the first thing that comes to my mind is when I'm taking my physics 1 class, the professor put up the slide about talking about his own research. And that got me really interested. Maybe I can do research as a freshman, jump the gun and take the lead and just take the initiative, basically. Maybe I can do research as a freshman. So I did really well in this class. And I visited the professor's office afterwards, and he immediately recognized me as the guy who was doing really well in his class. And he told me, you were doing awesome, and basically asked me, what do you want? I told him, you mentioned your research in class. I want to get to do research with you. Is there a chance? And he looked at me. He said, you know how to code? I said, no. He said, go learn how to code and come back and talk to me, which was very fair, because everything that he did was you needed at least to know how to code. So I said, okay, I'll learn how to code. In the meantime, what I did was I signed up for a bunch more classes in my sophomore year. So things like modern physics, and I forgot if I took classical mechanics. Maybe I took optics first and electronics. But then I also signed up for a C++ course, because in my undergrad, we were required to take some coding class. So I signed up for C++. So that, what I thought was the class that was going to help me go do research with this professor. So I signed up for the C++ class. I took the C++ class. But what ended up happening is I applied to this research experience for undergraduate program during my sophomore year. So there in the summer, I actually did a research internship for 10 weeks. So the first research experience that I had was not with this professor that I was hoping to work with. It was rather a 10-week program, an REU, that I did just having taken a C++ class. Luckily, he was the one who wrote me the letter of rec, and I think he wrote me a really nice letter, and I was already in Michigan, and the RU was in Michigan, so it all worked out. I ended up getting the RU. I ended up going through the RU 10 weeks. It was super fun. I learned a ton about neutrinos and detector physics, and by the end of it, I really learned this thing called root, which is what particle physicists use at the Large Hadron Collider or the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider. So all these fancy colliders, how do they do their data analysis on particle physics? They use this analysis framework called root. All right, so I learned root. I went through this REU for 10 weeks, and then I came back and I took a bunch more upper level physics and math courses. At this point, I was trying to decide what should be my second major or a minor, and eventually I settled on math as a second major. So I declared math as a second major, and I started taking a bunch more math classes as well, which were really fascinating, by the way. So I started taking these more classes, and I really wanted to go get into research again. So I went back to the professor and I told them, look, I did the REU, I took a C++ class, can I do research with you? And finally, he told me, all right, now you're ready. You know C++, you know root. Now's the time to get you to work on some project. So it took a while to actually do a project because he really had to figure out a way to get an undergrad to do research in nuclear physics and heavy ion nuclear physics. But eventually, he came up with a really interesting project that I could do as an undergrad. And he knew that I was ready to read papers and ready to go one step further. And so eventually I wrote my undergrad thesis on heavy ion collisions, and especially the quark gluon plasma, whether we see some sign of it in the beam energy scan of the star experiment at RIC, a bunch of technical jargon that maybe I can talk about later, but nevertheless, I did my undergraduate thesis on it. And in the meantime, I was applying to graduate school. And when I applied to graduate school, I applied to maybe about 12 places. I got rejected from all of them except 2. And luckily, the one I got into was also in Michigan. So I ended up going to graduate school for a PhD at the University of Michigan. So before talking about graduate school, I just want to tell you about one more thing that I did at undergrad, and that is when I took a differential equations class, I did really well in the course, and the professor during the next summer had funding to do some small research. So he got in contact with me and this other guy who was in the class, and he told us, hey, I have some money. Are you interested in doing a summer project on differential equations? And it's not every day that you get an opportunity just landing in your hands. So of course I said, yes, I want to do this project. Now granted, it wasn't the most interesting project. It was mostly mapping out diagrams in phase space and trying to follow the phase flow and understanding this thing called Lyapunov stability. And back then I was a tadpole in math. I would not understand any of the epsilon delta things. I would really struggle to understand it. At some point, it got computational, and I was able to really do research on the computation side of it and making really nice diagrams. But the theory was really difficult for me to grasp, especially since I hadn't taken any real analysis or abstract algebra courses. And so it was really thick these textbooks were really thick to understand. Nevertheless, I did this research project in math. And so that was another thing that went on my CV when I applied to graduate school. I had my undergraduate thesis. I had this REU, this research experience for undergraduate, and I also have this math research experience or a math project that I did with a professor in the math department. So I had a mixed bag of research experience, but I never published. And that was fine because you're not required to publish, though these days, I don't know, the future of physics is going to be interesting because a lot of these undergrads have first author publications, 2 first author publications, 5 first author publications. You never know what you're going to get. Some of these undergrads, they're just on a different level. But I just had 3 research experiences, no publications. I applied to 12 grad schools, and I just got into 2, and I got into one in Michigan, the University of Michigan, Go Blue, and that's the one that I attend right now. So before starting my first year of graduate school, one would wonder what would happen in the summer between your senior year of undergrad, you graduate, and then there's a whole summer, and there's like this big gap, and then you start graduate school. So what do you do in that summer? And a lot of people do different things. Some people do nothing, and they just end up having fun and traveling and doing stuff like that, and that's what I did. And then other people try to sort of review all the material, trying to get a head start in grad school, which is not really what I did, but at some point I did review a little bit of physics because they told us we had to take a qualifying exam. So let me first tell you what a qualifying exam is. So in graduate school, you have to pass your written examination after your first roughly 2 years, which basically is testing you to see if you understand the advanced undergraduate or introductory graduate level physics. So that's a written exam, and that's called the qualifying exam. And then there's another exam, which is oral, and you have to present it in front of a small committee of professors. And the idea there is that you present a small portion of your research idea, and the other professors would look at it and say, this is decent. It could be made into a thesis, into a dissertation. Or they would say, we don't see the potential here. Maybe you should think of a different path towards your dissertation. So that's called the preliminary examination. So you have to take 2 exams at the end of the day. There's the qualifying exam and the preliminary exam. Once you take these 2 exams, then you can apply to candidacy, and that's basically like getting your master's degree. So in the US, you apply to PhD positions. You don't need to have a master's degree, and that's what happened in my case. I went in having no master's degree, and so I picked up the master's degree along the way by successfully taking enough credits, passing the qualifying exam, passing the preliminary exam, and a few more requirements that are not so important. Okay, so in my first year, I passed the qualifying exam. I ended up taking it. It was mostly about advanced undergraduate topics, so that was out of the way. And honestly, the first year was the most fun because really everyone was always right next to each other. The cohort was taking classes together. We were working on problem sets together. We would go hang out together, play board games, do whatever. Everyone's there. They're excited. They want to see each other. And this was in the year 2019. And so we all know what happened in the year 2020. COVID hit. And so that completely transformed my graduate school experience. We went from a bunch of excited people in our first years to all of a sudden We can't see each other anymore. We can't do problem sets together. So what we had to do is go to Discord, and it's not the same being on Discord, but nevertheless, we tried. We went to Discord. We still tried to work on things together, tried to have, that sense of community as a cohort. These are the first years. We're the first years. We're kind of special in that. But eventually it sort of faded away. People drifted apart. The COVID years were difficult. People they didn't have the mental bandwidth to just stay online and interact with other people. And also people start to join their own research groups. So, all the first years that were all together in the offices and taking classes together, now they have to be separated and they have to go each work separately in a different group. So eventually your second, third, fourth, fifth year, etc., you're not really with this one big cohort anymore. It's sort of more like you're within your research group. And so it's a smaller kind of dynamic. So in my second year, I had to figure out a research mentor, and usually you have to figure it out before your second year, so the summer of your first year. So I figured out who I wanted to work with. I started working on some problem in particle physics where we're trying to compute loop diagrams in quantum field theory and trying to make these computations really quick and fast. And I had this project that I was working on with a professor. It went on for a couple of years. I got a publication out of it, and then funding sort of ran out, and there was issues with that. So I had to switch advisors. I had to switch almost entirely from theoretical particle physics to experimental particle physics, where people had more funding. So I shopped around for a few different professors, and I got lucky because there was one professor who was actually taking students. They had funding, and so I was able to join her group. She was awesome. She was amazing. I joined her group. I had experience working in experimental particle physics from undergrad. And slowly I started to kind of regain the momentum, because at that point I was still thinking, am I going to finish the PhD on time, switching advisors and all that. And slowly after gaining the momentum, I realized that, I could still end on time. I could still complete the projects, write a thesis, write the dissertation, and finish on time. And sure enough, after going through the PhD, I would go to summer schools, I would go to conferences, workshops, and that all was super fun. Most of the time it was funded. Thankfully, my advisor had some money in order to send us to these things. Not every research group has the ability, because sometimes you got to pay out of pocket if you want to go to a conference. We were more fortunate because our advisor had funding for these kinds of things. So I would go to a bunch of workshops. I would travel to Scotland. I would travel to, even within the States, I would travel to California, to Boston, stuff like that. Sometimes international, sometimes just locally in the US. And it was a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people. You get to discuss the cutting edge of research. So I work on jet physics at the Large Hadron Collider. And so you'd see a bunch of talks by these people that you always read their papers, and they're just there in front of your eyes giving talks. And something else you learn is that even the most brilliant people in the field are just people like you. They make mistakes. They don't know how to answer certain questions during a seminar or a conference. And you realize that these people, they're just like you, except they work really hard and they really think deeply about problems, and they come up with just brilliant solutions. So yes, they're brilliant, but they really are just like everyone else. So that was something else that I learned from attending all these conferences. So after going through now it's my third year, my fourth year, and my fifth year of graduate school, I ended up to where I am right now, which is writing my dissertation. So now I'm in the process of finishing up. Really did not hop around anymore. I stuck to one project, and I've been working on it ever since I switched advisors during my third year. And it's been going well. I've been doing a lot of progress to the point where now I'm ready to present all these findings and put it together in a dissertation. And I'm going to probably get 2 publications out of it, which are in the works right now. So overall, when the thesis is written and all said and done, I'll have maybe 3 papers at the end of my PhD, which is a decent amount. I don't know what the average is, but it's enough to get you that PhD and get you out the door. So that's basically how I went from being an undergrad in physics to getting my PhD in physics. There's a lot more detail that I'm not covering. I'm just giving you the very just summary, bare bones summary of how that happened. What I could do is go into more detail about specific things throughout the journey, but I just wanted to tell you how I went from high schooler not being interested in physics to almost getting my PhD very, very soon. So if you stuck around to this point, I would appreciate if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more long form videos and podcasts, because I will be joined by other professors where we would discuss very interesting physics things like the expansion of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, and a bunch more things that I'm hoping to start doing on this channel. So hit that follow button if you're interested, and I'll see you next time.